Hey everyone, my name is Paul, and I'm going to do a wrap up of the last month or two of the books I've read. Sorry, I haven't been making many videos. It's been a time, hasn't it? It's been a time. Okay, so Prince of Thorns and King of Thorns. So these books have been on my TBR on my shelf for years. Perfect example of books that I should have read when I bought them, and also a perfect example of I should have read the first book before buying all of the other books. These are average fantasy books. I am totally over the trope that the fantasy world that is being displayed is in the future of our world. So they find technology from our world in their fantasy world and they use it. Totally over that trope. It's just kind of boring to me. Interesting world as far as the magic. Characters are unlikable. The story isn't that great. I would give them like a 3 an average rating. I probably wouldn't recommend them. And then we have Orbital Cloud by Taiyo Fuji, which I would recommend. It is a near future science fiction story about orbital mechanics. There is a satellite that has basically become a weapon in space, and these individuals have to figure out a way to stop it. And it's a very global story. A lot of nationalities, people from different countries come together to solve an issue. I really appreciated that about this book. I also appreciated that the women in the book were the best in their field. They were very intelligent, and the author never really made a big deal about that. It just was, and I really appreciated that about this book. I liked it. If you're looking to read more translated works, I would definitely recommend this. Taiyo Fuji is from Japan, and I think I met him in San Jose. Seems like a super nice guy. Abaddon's Gate by James S.A. Corey. This is the Expanse series. You probably have heard of this series. You might be on the fence about if you should start this series. I would say you should. It's a fantastic science fiction series. It's probably the best or most popular, most sci-fi series of the last decade or so. And if what you envision in your mind for science fiction has a lot to do with the blockbuster appeal of science fiction, if you like that, then you probably would like these books as well. They're good. They're fun. Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is a Gothic horror story set in Mexico, and it's pretty good. I thought it was fun. It was atmospheric and creepy. A woman, something's going on with a woman's cousin. She just got married, but she's acting oddly, and she writes a letter for her to come visit for help. So her name's Naomi, goes to visit her cousin, and she finds that the place she's staying at might be haunted. The family that her cousin married into is a little weird, and the people in it are not very nice. What I learned from this book actually is something that very interesting to me. So there were 3 main male characters in this story, and each one represented a type of toxic behavior for men. One was a user, another one was an abuser, and the third one was the nice guy. And when I say the nice guy, the individual that isn't really totally truthful with their intentions, and they're unwilling to do the right thing at the right moment. And I thought that was very interesting. I'm probably one of the only people that really took away that from this story. It was good, though. I enjoyed the story. I thought that it wasn't her best book, but it's definitely worth reading, and it was fun. It was fun. I'd give it like a 3.5 or something like that. And then I read The Doll Maker by Nina Allen. So once I get into the short fiction, you'll find that dolls actually have become a theme in the last month and a half of my reading. I don't know why. So this is a short story collection, but it has a narrative interspersed between the short stories, and it tries to connect the short story collection within the main narrative. And the main narrative is about a man that is a doll maker, and he has a pen pal with a woman that is in a hospital, and he's a little weird, she is a little weird, and they kind of talk about their past together in the letters that they write to each other. And it's interesting because he ends up going to visit her, but as the story progresses, we find that he is a little bit mentally unstable, and she's actually a little bit more mentally stable than what we initially think. And the short fiction in this was fantastic. It's very much literary sci-fi, so if literary sci-fi is your thing, check this out. There's also some difficult scenes in this book as well, but really enjoyed it. Writing was fantastic. It's one of those books you enjoy while you're reading it and really love it, but then after you read it, you're like, what actually happened? It did get confusing at times, but I really enjoyed the experience. It was maybe one of my favorite things I've read recently. All right, let's get into some nonfiction. Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. I reread this. I really like Ryan Holiday, and I like his books a lot. He is a Stoic philosopher, and he has a podcast that I listen to as well called The Daily Stoic. And this one is all about how to limit the ego in our life so that we can do the things we do with the correct intentions. And I love this book so much. I read this last year. I read it again this year. It's probably going to be one of those ones that I read every year. That's how much I love it. And if Stoic philosophy interests you, check these books out. I'm going to talk about another one as well. So his style of writing is short chapters where he takes a historical figure, he makes an assertion of some way to live and connects it to the historical figure, so you're also learning history at the same time. It feels like you're reading many different essays, so it's easy to just jump in, read for about 10 minutes and jump out. And the writing is relatively simple, and I appreciated that. But a lot of the sentences are deep too. I take a lot out of these books. Stillness is the Key is the other Ryan Holiday book I read, and I just like these books. I enjoy the way they're written. I get a lot out of them. I remember a lot that was written, which is very important for me. This one is about creating stillness in your life, how to slow down a little bit and just create those moments of calm and peace in your life. And one thing that I gained from this book is not necessarily doing nothing, but it's doing things intentionally and doing things that might activate the other side of your brain, or things where you can, like an activity where you can just kind of zone out while doing it. And I thought it was fantastic. Once again, he takes examples from history and connects it to what he's writing. White Fragility. So I read this twice, actually. This is by Robin DiAngelo. And I was doing a thing where I was reading my nonfiction twice. Great book. Thought it was fantastic. Very short. I would recommend it for anyone that wants to know more about racism, more about white supremacy in the U.S., and how everyone is a part of it, and how the culture is created around racism and things of that nature, and how to not get upset when us white people talk about race and talk about racism. So it was very good, and I learned quite a bit from it. Okay, so let's go to the short fiction stories. We have That Tiny Flutter of the Heart I Used to Call Love by Robert Shearman from Nightmare magazine. This is from the June issue. This is a reprint, and this was my favorite story of this issue. It's a short story about dolls, and when this young woman was a young girl, her and her brother had a very bad relationship. Her brother would take her dolls into the woods, and he would basically torture her dolls so that she would never love anything more than him, and that the dolls, that she could disconnect from the dolls and not love the dolls. And she like totally buys into all of this. And one time they're like shooting a gun at one of the dolls, and she goes to do it. So then it jumps into the future, and she gets married, and the husband finds out that she's like has this really weird doll thing, and she basically, or he has to basically do something to one of her dolls to prove that she wants to prove that she loves him more than she loves the doll. And it's just so unnerving. The entire story is so unnerving, but I loved it. It was so good. Then I read another issue of Nightmare. This is the May issue. None of these really stood out for me, so I'll move on. Uncanny. This is the May-June 2020 issue, and the stories in here that I liked was Burn, or the Episodic Life of Sam Wells as a Super by A.T. Greenblatt, a story about an individual with a superpower that wants to join a super team, and his struggles to fit in with that team, and how he can use his ability, and how people in this world view people with superpowers. I thought it was very good. A.T. Greenblatt is an author that you definitely should be reading. She is one of the best upcoming newer writers around. I think she just won a Nebula Award. She's very good. And then High in the Clean Blue Air by Emma Torres. I thought this was really good as well. And it's about the shapeshifter that can turn into a goose, and her relationship with a woman, and how she visits her during migration season. And we find out that she ended up having a relationship with a man, and she's basically on the run from this guy, and he ends up finding her. It was very good. So Phah magazine, I started subscribing to this a few months ago. It is a magazine of black speculative fiction, and it's really good. I enjoy it. The first issue that I'm going to talk about is issue number 10, the hair issue. If you want to try out Phah, I would recommend this issue because I thought this was the best one out of all of them. All of the stories were really good. In That Place, She Grows a Garden by Del Sendine. This is a story about a woman that is made to cut her hair at school because it is too unruly. And when doing so, she ends up sprouting flowers on her head after that. Great story. My Snakes by Frida Vaughn is another story about hair where this woman starts dating people and they don't want her to have her natural hair. I believe she had dreadlocks. And it's an interesting story about accepting yourself the way you are. And then there's a story by Cherie Phah called No Late for School. And that was another story about a student and issue with their hair as well. But the one that I enjoyed the most was by Jen Brown. Jen Brown, White Dragons Claim the Sky. And it might have been Wild Dragons Claim the Sky. I might have typoed that. But anyways, it's a fantasy story about a woman that can weave enchantments into individuals' hair to give them strength. And she goes to this competition with this woman that is also a fighter, and she weaves enchantments in her hair to help her do well in the contest. It's like a gladiator or like a knight showdown like contest. I thought it was fantastic. It was well written, so good. Remind me a lot of J.Y. Yang's fiction. Jen Brown, look out for her. And then we have issue 11 from Phah. My favorite story from here was Doll Seed by Michelle Tracer Berger, another doll story. So good. It's the story from the point of view of a black doll, and it's a Toy Story like story that looks at racism and skin color from the viewpoint of dolls, and if they're wanted or not based off of how the dolls look. Really good, fantastic, loved that story. And then there is Phah issue number 12. My favorite story from here was The Midnight Host by Gregory Neil Harris. Jordan Peele like vibes from this. Actually, a lot of the stories in Phah had a very horror aspect, and a lot of the ones I ended up liking the most had a horror aspect as well. So two young black boys end up visiting their relative, and their neighbor is an old slave plantation, and they get stuck on that land, and there are ghosts from the times when there were slaves there, and they have to try to get out and maybe even save the spirits that are trapped there from the overseer. Really interesting story, really good. And then Phah issue 13, Ya Schofield. They write a great story called All That the Storm Took. It's about Hurricane Katrina, and two sisters that were trapped in the attic during Hurricane Katrina, and what happens to one of the sisters. Frightening, emotional, fantastic story. I will read something by Schofield in the future. Great writer, fantastic. And then Phah issue number 14. This is the spring 2020 issue, and my favorite one from here was Uniform by Eric Nunnally. This is a story about a vet from the Army that comes back and has to get a robotic body, basically, because there was an incident. And another fantastic story by Eric Nunnally. Really good. And it deals with how people perceive individuals that they don't know within, like, just walking around or at the subway or doing mass transit, things of that nature, and how he is dealing with how he looks and who he is now in this society. Very good. So that's it. If you've watched the whole thing, thanks a lot. I know this one was long, but those were the things that I've read. in the last month and a half or so. I'll be back with another video soon, hopefully. I'm actually going to be trying a challenge, and during that challenge, I'll make some videos with those challenges. So thanks for watching.